TFA fam, welcome back in. Appreciate you rocking with me. Going to go over some of my favorite plays at wide receiver for week 14. Not going to hit on any of the obvious guys, though, especially with 6 teams on bye. You don't need to hear me talk about why Mike Evans is a good play this week. So let's go ahead and just dive into it. Going to kick things off with Jayden Reed on Thursday Night Football going up against the Lions. Now, Jayden Reed has been one of the most inconsistent and frustrating receivers all season long. But this is a spot where it sets up pretty well for him. This game has the highest total on the week at 51.5. Both of these teams have implied team totals of over 24 points, so there should be plenty of opportunities for fantasy goodness here. The Lions slot corner has allowed the second most yards from the slot this season, and that is where Reed lines up for almost 80% of his snaps. And the Lions are also a true pass funnel defense. They've allowed the second fewest fantasy points per game to running backs on the year and the fourth most points per game to wide receivers. For the Packers, Josh Jacobs has carried the ball at least 18 times over the past 3 weeks. I don't think it's going to be a spot where they're going to be able to control it with Jacobs as much, which should lend itself to more opportunities for the passing game. And we have Romeo Doubs out for this one as well with a concussion once again. So that could push more looks to Jayden Reed. Next up, Jakobi Meyers has a 22% target share on the year, has at least 11 targets in 3 of his last 4, 90-plus yards in 3 of his last 4, and over his last 5 games, his worst finish was wide receiver 48, which is still flex-worthy depending on your league size and your starting requirements. But outside of that, he has been wide receiver 26 or better in half PPR scoring in 4 of his last 5. He has a 34% air yard share as well, which ranks 20th in the league, and his 28.8% first read share is tied for 24th. Now Meyers gets a matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have allowed the 9th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers on the year, 10th most to receivers over the past 5 weeks. We have a solid total here at 46.5, and the Raiders are currently 6.5-point underdogs, so this should put them in a pass-heavy script. Next up, Calvin Ridley. Ridley has a 22.8% target share on the year, puts him 24th among wide receivers. He's also 21st in first read percentage. Since coming out of their bye week in week 5, Ridley is averaging 8.5 targets per game. If you take out the week in week 6 where he had no catches on 8 targets, he is averaging nearly 77 yards per game since then. And then since week 7, he's wide receiver 22 in points per game and half PPR scoring. Now gets a matchup against the Jags defense, who have allowed the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the last 3 weeks, 3rd most on the year overall. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams combined for more than 200 yards and 3 scores just a few weeks ago. Nico Collins put up nearly 16 half PPR points last week despite not scoring. The only worry here is that if they go with a run-heavy script, if they end up going up and leading in this game, or obviously Will Levis just being awful. But the spot here is too good to pass up. Really is going to be on the fringe wide receiver 1 rankings for me this week. Next up is going to be a game situation that I actually really like, and that is going to be the Bears and the 49ers. Caleb Williams on the Bears side is averaging 275 passing yards on 39 attempts per game over his last 3 weeks since Shane Waldron was fired. The offense has looked much more competent as a whole. And over the last few weeks, the 49ers defense just hasn't been playing up to the standard of what we've come to expect from it the past few seasons. Nick Bosa is still not practicing. And on paper, the 49ers passing defense looks good. But when you look at their schedule, there isn't much there. They got to face a Rams passing attack without Kupp or Puka in week 3. Jakobi Brissett, they got in week 4. They had the Cardinals inconsistent passing attack. They got the Chiefs without Rice or D-Hop. And then they got the Bucs without Godwin or Evans, just to name a couple of those situations. But the reason why I also like this spot for the Bears passing attack is I think we see San Fran's offense get back on track. The Bears are allowing the 6th highest yards per play in the league, the 3rd highest yards per carry, and the 10th highest net yards per pass attempt. So for the 49ers, I like Jauan Jennings here, who has really been the only receiver to do anything over the last several weeks. And as bad as it's been for San Fran, we're only 2 weeks removed from Jennings posting back-to-back 90-plus yards performances and being a wide receiver 2 or better in those weeks. And it was also looking like Jennings was going to be one of the best waiver adds for fantasy this season. And because I expect San Fran to bounce back in this spot, this will in turn push the Bears into a heavier passing script, which has been pretty fruitful for fantasy purposes across the board for Chicago's pass catchers. Over the last 3 weeks, DJ Moore has seen 30 targets, and he's been a top 12 wide receiver twice. Keenan Allen, 31 targets, a top 12 wide receiver twice. And even Odunze has seen 26 targets over that span as well. The issue with Odunze and why he hasn't really popped up for fantasy purposes is he's seeing targets way further down the field than DJ Moore or Keenan Allen. Over the last 3 weeks, Odunze is 5th in the NFL in total air yards. So if these start to hit, Odunze could have a massive game. We also have to keep in mind that Keenan and DJ Moore started the week with DNPs. So if either of them were to miss or be limited, that would obviously open up more looks for Odunze. And like I said, with where he is getting targeted, really all it takes is one for him to pay off if you're plugging him into your flex. So there's reason to be optimistic for Odunze as well. Next up is going to be Jeudy. I definitely did not have talking about Jeudy or wanting to play Jeudy on my fantasy bingo card this year. But here we are thanks to Jameis Winston. Since week 8, Jeudy is wide receiver 3 on a points per game basis. And even if you remove his week 13 game where he went off for over 200 yards, he'd still be wide receiver 16 from weeks 8 to 12. Jeudy has posted at least 73 receiving yards in 5 straight games. He also has 49 targets over that span, which would tie him for the 10th most among wide receivers. Now gets a matchup against the Steelers defense that does not worry me at all. Looks like Cedric Tillman is likely going to miss this game with a concussion. Was not practicing on Thursday, so he still remains in the protocol. That's going to put Jeudy as the focal point of this passing offense once again. And we just had Jeudy go 6 for 65 against Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago in that snow globe game. And as of right now, it does not look like weather is going to be a factor at all for this Sunday. So you can fire up Jeudy again in week 14. And lastly, is going to be Jordan Addison. The Falcons are allowing the 4th highest schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game to outside wide receivers per fantasy points data. That's where Addison lines up the majority of his time. Addison is also lined up in the slot for over 30% of his snaps this season. And when that happens, he's going to be mostly lined up against D. Alford, who just gotten torched all year in the slot. The Falcons are allowing the 8th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers just in general, and the 2nd most over the past 5 weeks. Addison has seen at least 6 targets in his last 3 games, has 2 TDs over that span as well. If Atlanta decides to double Jefferson, throw bracket coverage his way and attempt to slow him down, it could be a spike week for Addison.